Since XRP's rally late last year, many media outlets have been asking when it will give back those impressive gains. So far, XRP's answer has been never, as its price has remained resilient for months. Now it looks like XRP is on the brink of another massive breakout, one that could take its price much higher than anyone could have expected. And this big move could begin by the end of the month. And that's why today we're going to bring you up to speed on everything that XRP has been up to, examine how high it could go in the coming months, and reveal the catalysts that could take it there. My name is Nick. Stay tuned. First things first, you need to know that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just educational content intended to inform you about XRP. Also, do note that nobody at the Coin Bureau team holds XRP as part of their personal portfolio, but some of us do hold altcoins in XRP's ecosystem as a higher beta bet on XRP. And if you want to know which altcoins we do hold and which ones we're personally considering accumulating, then become a member of the Coin Bureau Club. That's where we review small cap altcoins every single week, post crypto alpha every day, and discuss emerging narratives in the members' Discord. The link will be down below. Now, it's only been about 3 months since we last covered XRP, but a lot has happened since then. Shortly after our last review went live, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse announced that the SEC would be dropping its appeal in its case against Ripple, which is not surprising given the SEC's recent change in leadership. But apparently the story isn't over. According to a subsequent CoinDesk report, the judge in the case rejected the $50 million settlement between Ripple and the SEC, arguing that it was, quote, procedurally improper. To our understanding, this means that the legal issues between the SEC and Ripple are still technically ongoing, but do note that this has no impact on XRP. Anyways, another big milestone for XRP in March was the launch of a testnet of its XRPL EVM sidechain. Now, for reference, this is a Cosmos-based blockchain currently in development that will support Ethereum-style smart contracts and use XRP to pay for these fees. And as we've noted in our previous XRP updates, the launch of this EVM sidechain is arguably the most important milestone coming for XRP, and that's simply because it will significantly increase its programmability, making it possible to do things like borrow stablecoins against XRP in DeFi. And this could result in an enormous injection of crypto-native liquidity into XRP's ecosystem that could spill over into other EVM and Cosmos-based blockchains. Almost 100 crypto projects are building on the XRPL EVM testnet, with MetaMask and other major crypto wallets adding support for it in recent months. Although no official date has been set for the mainnet launch of this sidechain, comments made by Garlinghouse and multiple posts on X suggest that it could happen or at least be announced later this month at the ETHCC conference in Paris. Now, for those unfamiliar, the ETHCC conference is one of the most important conferences for everything EVM, and it will take place from June 30th to July 3rd. So, mark your calendars, and while you're at it, take a second to smash that like button down below and make sure you're subscribed as well, because apparently 34% of you forgot. And you may as well ping the bell as well to make absolutely sure you get a notification for our next upload. Back to the video. Now, April is when things started getting exciting for XRP. First, Aave, the largest lending and DeFi borrowing protocol, added support for Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin. In retrospect, it was obvious. We previously noted how RLUSD's supply had been growing significantly on Ethereum. Next thing you know, it's been integrated into the top DeFi protocols, presumably in preparation for the XRPL EVM. On that note, the XRP Ledger Foundation simultaneously published a blog post talking about the expansion of XRP's DeFi ecosystem. Logically, this suggests that DeFi is going to be the focus for XRP in the coming months, which is likewise consistent with the upcoming XRPL EVM launch. And FYI, it's likely that XRP will be used as collateral to borrow RLUSD, which will be beneficial to both Ripple and XRP. Speaking of which, you probably heard the news that Ripple acquired a prime broker called Hidden Road in April, and this will reportedly increase the demand for both XRP and RLUSD, as both assets will be used in its clearing process. But it's not entirely clear how or when. For what it's worth, Hidden Road recently announced OTC crypto swaps, so chances are we'll get more announcements like that very soon. Anyhow, another important development for XRP that took place in April is probably one you didn't hear about. And that was the news that another vulnerability had been found in XRP's code. And if you watched our previous video, you'll know that a lot of vulnerabilities have been discovered in the code over the last couple of years. And there was even an outage back in February. We'll come back to that a bit later. Now, on a more positive note, Coinbase received approval from the CFTC to launch XRP futures back in April. And shortly after that, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or CME, listed XRP futures as well. Now, some of you might recall that the CME had accidentally noted this on its website earlier this year, and you might even remember that this meant the CME would launch XRP futures just because the same had happened with Sol futures. If you don't know why this is so important, it's essentially because it increases the chances that the spot ETFs for XRP and Sol will get approved by the SEC. And this is probably why Bloomberg ETF analysts currently have the odds of a spot XRP approval in 2025 at 85%. Sol is at 90% in case you were wondering. On that note, the SEC recently delayed its decision about multiple spot altcoin ETFs, including the XRP ones. According to those aforementioned Bloomberg ETF analysts, the final deadline for most altcoin ETFs, including those of XRP, is October this year, and they could bring billions of dollars of inflows into altcoins. And that reminds me, there have been lots of interesting developments when it comes to the institutional demand for XRP. For starters, a publicly traded pharmaceutical company called Wellgistics Health announced it would use XRP for payments and that it would accumulate XRP as part of its $50 million raise. A publicly traded chauffeur service called WeBus International announced that it would use XRP for payments and would likewise accumulate XRP as part of a $300 million raise. Newsflash, but this suggests that we could start seeing more publicly traded companies adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy, but with XRP instead of BTC. Not only that, but Hashkey announced that it would offer XRP to institutional investors in Asia, and Ripple announced it had launched its cross-border crypto payments product in the UAE. And earlier this month, Dubai regulators also gave the green light to Ripple's stablecoin. As a cherry on top, Coinbase announced that it had launched a wrapped version of both XRP and Doge on Base, and this will make it easy for XRP holders on Coinbase to use their XRP in DeFi on one of Ethereum's largest layer 2s. As with the XRPL EVM sidechain, this will increase crypto-native liquidity. The difference in this case is that this crypto-native liquidity will probably flow mostly into other cryptos on Base. And this brings me to the moment you've all been waiting for, and that's XRP's price action and potential. I'll start by saying that Apex 2025, one of XRP's largest events, is currently underway at the time of shooting this video, and chances are that there will be one or more catalysts that cause XRP to pump in the short term. As you can see, the Bollinger Band moving average on the weekly is a perfect indicator for when XRP is in a bullish trend or in a bearish trend. When it's above this moving average, it's in a bullish trend, and when it's below it, it's in a bearish trend. Well, it's on the brink of breaking back above this moving average, and any major announcements out of Apex 2025 could be the catalyst that does the trick. And when you zoom out to XRP's monthly chart, you'll notice something truly fascinating. Perhaps we're mistaken, but XRP's price action in recent months looks almost identical to early 2021, just before it went parabolic. Obviously, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, and in this case, it's rapping. In all seriousness, the fact of the matter is that there are lots of upcoming milestones that could take XRP much higher in the coming months. And this begs the question of how high it could go. Believe it or not, but the XRP chart also has the answer. Not the XRP price chart, but its market cap chart. XRP's market cap appears to be painting a bull flag. If it breaks out, it could hit a market cap of almost $300 billion. And this would translate to an XRP price of around $5, which is the same price target we noted in our previous video. This time around, however, we reckon it's worth expanding on what could happen when or if this price target is indeed hit. Of course, almost every XRP holder is watching $5 carefully. And this is mostly because XRP's price has been chopping around 50 cents prior to its 2024 pump. $5 would then be a 10x from that average price. XRP traders and whales probably know this, and this could create lots of volatility around the $5 level. On the one hand, it could result in XRP topping out around $4.5 as traders and long-term holders take profit just before the $5 level to try and get out before most other investors. On the other hand, it could result in XRP whales purposely pushing its price above $5, say to $6 or $7. And this would cause many investors who sold XRP below $5 to FOMO back in, expecting it to rally to the next key psychological level of $10. We suspect that this second scenario is the most likely due to all the additional crypto-native liquidity that's going to be coming into XRP's ecosystem. And this will make it very easy for XRP whales to borrow stablecoins against their XRP to buy more XRP, pushing its price even higher. And this would also increase the value of their collateral, allowing them to borrow even more money without having to sell any XRP, which of course also allows them to avoid any taxable gains. And this is extremely important to note because it suggests that XRP could have a prolonged topping pattern rather than a parabolic blow-off top, with XRP's price chopping between $4 to $6 for weeks, maybe even longer. And if you want to maximize your returns when XRP resumes its uptrend, then check out the Coin Bureau deals page down below. That's where you'll find sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000, trading fee discounts of up to 50%, and cashbacks on deposits of up to 75% on the best crypto exchanges around. You see, these deals, well, they won't be around for long. So take advantage of them ASAP using the link down below or this QR code right over here. Now, whether XRP could rally to $6 or more ultimately depends on its upcoming milestones. While there is no official roadmap for XRP, there's no shortage of milestones to be found if you look around. We've already covered two of these, the upcoming XRPL EVM sidechain and the spot ETFs. Two additional milestones can be found on the XRPL website, and these are the implementation of smart contracts and automated market makers. Now, for those unfamiliar, the XRP ledger has limited smart contract functionality. And this is good for stuff like cross-border payments, as it keeps costs low and congestion low, but it's bad for stuff like tokenized RWAs and other such use cases. And this includes stablecoins, hence why most of RLUSD's supply is on Ethereum, and why the second largest chain for RLUSD will be the XRPL EVM after it launches. In case it wasn't clear enough, Ripple is focused on growing its stablecoin as much as possible. And this is unfortunately bad news for XRP, as RLUSD could replace it in many of Ripple's use cases. But it could also be good news, as reserve revenue could fund XRP's expansion. In fact, Brad Garlinghouse effectively confirmed this in an interview earlier this year. He specified that Ripple's goal is to turn RLUSD into a top 5 stablecoin by market cap, and that Ripple's sales of XRP could decline as it earns more revenue from reserves on its stablecoin. Combine this with whales selling less XRP because they can borrow against it, and you get less supply with the same or more demand. The caveat, though, is that Ripple President Monica Long confirmed in an interview that they're planning on making more large acquisitions like Hidden Road to further increase RLUSD's adoption. And chances are that these purchases will be financed primarily from Ripple selling XRP. To put things into perspective, XRP's supply has grown by roughly 800 million since March, assuming an average price of around $2 per XRP during this period, and that means that more than $1.5 billion of XRP could have been sold. And again, most of this new supply is coming from Ripple's monthly escrow. In theory, this sell-in pressure will subside as RLUSD grows and Ripple gets more and more of its revenue from its reserves. In practice, this isn't guaranteed. Garlin House seem to be nervous about the prospect of big banks getting involved in stablecoins after stablecoin regulations are passed. It goes without saying that stablecoins issued by mega banks could eat into the market share of crypto-native stablecoins. As a newer and smaller stablecoin, RLUSD is especially vulnerable to this competition, and this means that its dominance could shrink rather than grow after stablecoin regulations are passed in the US. In turn, this could force Ripple to sell more XRP to finance its operations and expansion. Alternatively, Ripple could IPO, which would allow the company to raise lots of capital without having to sell much, if any, XRP. But back to XRP itself. There's one upcoming catalyst that everyone seems to have forgotten about, and that's the US government officially announcing which altcoins it's going to hold as part of its so-called digital asset stockpile. Now, to refresh your memory, Trump announced that XRP would be one of the cryptos included in this stockpile, which will consist primarily of cryptos that were seized by US law enforcement. There's just one problem, and that's the fact that a recent Politico report claims that a lobbyist with connections to Ripple was the one who pushed Trump to make this announcement, and that when Trump found out about this, he was furious. And this means it's possible that XRP won't be included as part of this digital asset stockpile, either because Trump doesn't want it to be, or because it was never going to be. And this, of course, brings me to the challenges that we foresee for XRP. And the first challenge is perhaps the most significant, and that's development. The XRP ledger itself launched almost 13 years ago, and developers are still finding bugs and technical issues. Now, to be fair, a lot of these bugs are related to the XRP ledger's ongoing development. Even so, this is probably not inspiring confidence among institutional investors that are interested in using the XRP ledger for things like tokenized RWAs. Now, to be clear, the XRP ledger is already being used for some tokenized RWAs, but our point is that bugs and outages suggest additional adoption could be limited. Fortunately, the XRPL EVM sidechain will help. Unfortunately, it will be a brand new when it launches, meaning it won't be battle-tested enough for institutions to feel comfortable issuing or depositing large amounts of assets on its chain in size. Thankfully, Ripple could make institutions more comfortable by testing new developments like tokenized assets with its subsidiaries like Hidden Road. And this ties into XRP's second challenge, though, and that's adoption. On Ripple's side, the biggest headwind to adoption will be TradFi institutions like asset managers and mega banks getting more involved in crypto thanks to better crypto regulations. Ripple will face intense competition from these entities, and, as noted earlier, the result could be limited adoption of its products, whether they use RLUSD or XRP. On XRP's side, the biggest headwind to adoption is the enormous gap between holders and users. On-chain analysis suggests that there are millions of holders, but just tens of thousands of users. In other words, most people aren't actually using XRP, they're just speculating on its price. Even though this usage is likely to increase substantially with the launch of the EVM sidechain, most of this increased usage will likely involve using XRP as collateral to borrow RLUSD. Make no mistake, this will be huge for its price in the short term, but for it to continue heading higher long term, the XRP ledger and/or the XRP EVM sidechain will need to start providing more elaborate use cases. And this relates to XRP's third challenge, and that's the potential buildup of leverage in XRP's ecosystem, both off-chain and on-chain. Off-chain leverage includes stuff like publicly traded companies borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars to buy XRP. And once again, this will be huge for XRP's price in the short term. But If these companies become forced sellers during the bear market, it could tank XRP's price as a result. Then when it comes to the on-chain leverage component, this includes everything I've been talking about in this entire video. And that's the large amounts of borrowing we're likely to see using XRP as collateral. Do note that this is not unique to XRP. We're also likely going to see billions of dollars of borrowed capital using BTC, ETH, and SOL as collateral. The difference is that XRP is unlikely to have the same amount of on-chain liquidity as these other cryptos. And this means that XRP would be more vulnerable to DeFi liquidations compared to other large-cap cryptos when there is a downturn. Combine this with the possibility that publicly traded companies will be forced to sell their XRP in a bear market, and you have a recipe for a massive liquidation event that could take it to unprecedented lows. Now, for what it's worth, this is a risk that's present with every other crypto. Objectively speaking, XRP is looking good here, as they say on crypto Twitter. Most of the challenges I just noted are unlikely to have a meaningful effect on its price potential in the coming months, assuming they materialize at all. I'll also remind you that there are a lot of bullish milestones also coming up for XRP, and these will likely offset any headwinds created by the challenges XRP could face in the coming months. Finally, keep in mind that there will be many more milestones unrelated to XRP that could take the entire crypto market higher, including XRP. And you can use that link in the top right to watch a video which explains exactly what these milestones are. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, you can do that right over here. This is me, Nick, signing off. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon.